Hello. So today I'm going to be showing you how to solve another puzzle that I've created. It has the extremely creative name Nonconsecutive Diagonals. So this is using a, at least new to me, constraint, which I wanted to play around with. And I feel like I've made a fairly interesting puzzle out of it. So for the rules for this puzzle, obviously, normal Sudoku rules still apply. So every row, column, and box must have the digits 1 to 9. In addition to that, if let's say a 1 were here, then digits to its diagonals cannot be consecutive. So we can't have a 2 here, or if this were, say, a 3, we couldn't have a 2 here or a 4 here. So the two digits that are consecutive with a cell cannot appear diagonally in any of these. So not just for the center of a box, if it's in, say, the corner of this box, of the 3 here, then these 4 diagonals can't be 4 or 2. So they can be any other digit, not 4 or 2, including they can be 3. So don't get confused, because normally in the standard non-consecutive where it's adjacent digits, you obviously can't be 3 because of normal Sudoku rules, but diagonals don't get affected by normal Sudoku rules unless you're in the same box. So in this case, 3, 3 is absolutely fine. The other rules, in case you haven't seen them, this is standard little killers and standard arrows, but I will go over those in case you don't know how those work. So these little killers, they have a number and they have an arrow pointing in a certain direction. So that's going to point at cells in that direction. It goes all the way to the other end of the board. So this 11 points this way, this 7 points this way, this 22 points this way, etc. So what that means is when we get the final digits filled in to, say, these cells, and we added them up, it would add to 22. Or here, these two would add to 11. They can repeat. So there's nothing in this puzzle other than normal Sudoku rules that prevent repeating digits, just to be clear. And for arrows, there's what I call the shaft of the arrow, or the point of the arrow, and we have the circle. So there's a circle and there's a line with an arrow on it. So for if you look at the digits on the shaft of an arrow, they will add up to the value in the circle. So for example, if I were to put a 1 here and a 1 here, this would add to 2. So that would be, say, it's a minimum. And if I were to have a 9 here and a 9 here, obviously FPuzzles knows this is impossible, because that would make this add to 18, and you can't fill 18 into a single cell. So that's a little tip for you, is you can never have if you have a single circle arrow, you can never have a 9 on there, because you've already, unless it's a one digit shaft. For this one, it has an oval instead of a circle that encompasses 2 digits. What that means is when we read the final amount, say 2, 3, right? That would mean that these add to 23. So whatever we end up filling in to this oval, that has to equal the sum of these 4 cells. So in this case, we could easily have a 9, because we can exceed 10 on these. Something interesting to point out, just in general, for ovals like this, is there can't be a 0. So it must be a 2-digit number, because it can't have a leading 0. And it can't be 10, 20, or 30, or 40, or 50, right? Because you can't have a 0 in this cell. So those are the rules. Something else to point out is, you may have noticed already, FPuzzles does not have the diagonal non-consecutive constraint built in, so you're going to have to enforce that yourself. Just be careful. And of course, you can always reference the end of my video here to check your solution to make sure it's correct. Because FPuzzles will accept all sorts of solutions here that are incorrect, because the only thing that makes this unique is the non-consecutive diagonal constraint. Otherwise, there are a lot of different solutions. So just be careful there. It will not call you out on it. Other than that, that's what you need to know to attempt my puzzle. and I wish you luck on it if you would like to solve it. Just look below at the link that I have right in the description. You can click that. It'll send you to this exact page where you can use fpuzzles and solve my puzzle, or attempt to. And if you get stuck, feel free to reference my video. If you don't feel like solving it, feel free to just watch me solve it. So obviously, because I set this puzzle, it is not a live solve. I've tried to bake down to kind of what I believe to be a nice path to solving this puzzle. You may find some alternatives. You may find some stuff that I missed in my own puzzle. That's absolutely possible. But this is kind of the intended path for solving, is one way to put it, or a fun path for solving. Anyway, so let's get started. I'm going to start with some immediate things to notice that may catch your eye as soon as you see the puzzle. So in no particular order, maybe just starting at the top here. So this is a 2-digit sum, and we have 4 on the arrow. So at maximum, we could have 9999. It's probably not 9999, but that would be the maximum we could fill in. And so that means that we can't be 40, right? Because you don't even have to add 4 9s to tell that that's not going to add to 40, because it would have to be 4 10s. So for this initial digit, it's going to be a 1, 2, or 3, because 40 or higher is not possible to get with this sum. We're not too worried about this second digit yet, because, you know, if, say, this were a 2, there'd be all sorts of ways to make anything from 21 through 29. So we're not worried about, like, oh, if it were a 3, blah, blah, blah. And then it's natural to then look at this 7 sum. So if this is 1, 2, or 3, in order to add to 7, if it were a 1, we'd need a 6, a 2 would need a 5, and a 3 would need a 4. So here's our first bit of non-consecutive diagonal logic. Can it be 3, 4? Well, if this were 3 and this were 4, to add to 7, those are consecutive. So that's not possible, which means that this actually can't be 3. So we are limited to 1, 2 here and 5, 6 here. So this is much more limited than one might instantly recognize, especially if you're not used to non-consecutive diagonals. I don't know how you could be used to non-consecutive diagonals unless you're in the future. But anyway, the next thing we can look at is the 16. 16 in 2 cells can only be done one way with 2 unique numbers. We obviously can't do 8, 8 because they're in the same box. And so this has to be 7, 9. Finally, we can look at this arrow here. So its circle is on the 7 sum, which means it can't exceed 4. Just to show, if this were a 5, even if we did 1, 1, 1 in here, that would add to 8, and we have to add to 7. Exactly. So 4 is our maximum. We're not going to even worry about minimum yet, because let's look at what we could minimum sum to on the arrow. So 1 and 1 would add to 2, and we can't do 1 and 2 because that would, if we did say 1, 2 here, then that would be consecutive. So it can't be 1 and 2 or 2 and 1 because these are consecutive with each other. So we can't actually add to 3. And so then for 4, we would be 2 and 2, or we would be 3 and 1. But let's not forget our diagonals. Let's look at this 1, 1, 2 case again. Here we've actually put the 2 diagonal with a 1. So if the 2 is diagonal with a 1, that breaks our constraint. So we can't put a 1 here, which means there's no way to actually add to 2. So we can actually remove the 2 here, which means we have to add to 4, which means we're either 1, 3, or we're 2, 2. Now, looking at this 4, we can actually fill 4 in. This can't be a 3 because it would be diagonal with the 4. And so because this can't be a 3, this can't be a 1. So we're actually limited to 1, 3 or 2, 2 on this arrow. So the next thing we can do is, and we could have done this earlier, I mean, you may have done this in a different order, but by placing a 4 here, we can instantly know what these are. They have to be 1s, because 4 plus 3 is 7, and in order to get 3 in 3 cells, they have to be 1. Hopefully I don't have to explain that, but I did anyway. So now both of these ones actually now see this square, so it has to be a 2, and so in order to add to 4, we have to have a 2 there as well. Next, we are actually going to look at this 22, which normally you would be insane to try to fill this 22, but the diagonal constraint is extremely powerful here. And I'm not going to be maybe exhaustive in explaining this and proving it, but I think here's a good way that you could come to this conclusion, that not only is 22 the minimum sum this could be, but there's only one way to do it. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to start with this cell. So what is the minimum for this cell? Well, there's a 1 in the box, so the minimum's 2, and there's nothing here preventing that from being 2. So now we can look at this cell, and we can't be 1 or 2 because we already have the 2 filled in. And we can't be 3 because it would be diagonal with a 2. So the minimum for this one is 4. Now for this cell, it can't be 1 or 2 because of the row. It can't be 4 because of the 4 we placed in the box or the 4 down here, which means that we can't exchange these two, right? We can't ever put a 4 here. And it can't be 3 or 5 because that would be diagonal to a 4. So in general, what we're going to find in these puzzles is that this center square, first of all, is extremely powerful because it sees all 4 of these diagonals. But also, when you put a digit in there, it removes 3 digits from the ones diagonal to it. So it removes 3, 4, and 5 from this cell. So that means the minimum is 6. So that's going to add to 12, which leaves 10 in these 3, and we already have 2, which means these 3 would have to add to a maximum of 8. So this is the minimum of 12, and I leave it as an exercise to you to prove that no matter how you play with these numbers, this is the minimum you're going to get. If you make any other changes to this, like, oh, well, what if I wanted this to be a 5? I guess I am showing some stuff, but if I wanted this to be a 5, well, now this can't be 4, but it also can't be 3. So now I'm replacing it with 6, and I'm already higher. And then, well, what if this wasn't a 2? Well, now we don't have a 2 in here. So in general, you're going to find this is the minimum we can place. Now, it doesn't mean that's what we have to place. It's just the minimum. But having that as the minimum means that the maximum that these two can add up to is 8, because we're going to get 8 plus 2 is 10, plus 12 is 22. So how are we going to get 8? Well, let's figure out what the minimum is for these two. We have 1 and 2 in the box already, so we'd like to have a 3. The minimum is going to have to involve a 3 probably, and this is the only place the 3 can go because the 2 would be diagonal to this one. And so then that leaves 5 as the minimum for this square. And just to show, 1, 2, 3 are in the box, 4 is here, no diagonal logic at all, just this has to be 5 at minimum, and that already adds to 8. And again, no matter how you play with these, if you change any of these numbers, you're going to sum higher than 8. So the minimum we can make this is 8, but it's also the maximum that we are allowed to make this because the minimum here is 12. So the conclusion here is that these are actually the values. And just to show, 3 plus 5 is 8, plus 2 is 10, plus another 10 is 20, plus 2 is 22. So we are going to fill in these digits. And again, if you don't believe me, I would love to see in the comments any other way this is done, and I'm pretty sure, I'm positive that this is the only way to make 22, and there's no way to make anything less than 22. So that is essentially the initial break-in. So we got a bunch of digits, but that is not the end of this puzzle. There's still quite a bit of a challenge. Now, the next thing that I'd recommend looking at is the combination of this arrow and this 11 sum. So let me see. The best way to put this is how do we make this 11? Let's start with that. So 11 is going to be, in terms of this square, it can't be 1 or 2. So it's going to be 3 plus 8, or it can be 4 plus 7. And it normally could be 5 plus 6, but 5 and 6 would be consecutive. So we can't actually be 5, 6. Similarly, we can't be 6, 5. So again, 6 and 5, that's consecutive. So can we be 7? Well, that depends on this arrow, but I guess for now we can fill it. So we can do 7, well, we can't be 7 because that would have to be 7, 4, and there's a 4 in the column already, so we can't be 7. And can we be 8 plus 3? Well, for now we'll say we can, but I think we're going to very quickly find out that we can't, because if we wanted an 8 here for this arrow, we'd have to put a 1 here and a 9 here, and as you can see, there's already a 1 in the column. So this actually can't be 8, which means we're either 3, 4, or we're 7, 8. Or sorry, 3. What I meant to say is we're either 3, 8, or we're 4, 7 in this exact order. So let's figure out what this sum can be next. What is the minimum this cell can be? So it can't be, it's diagonal to a 2, so it can't be a 1 or a 3. So it could be a 2, and it could be a 5, but it obviously can't exceed 5 because, well, I suppose it could be 6, right? So 6 plus 3 would make 9 here. And then 5 plus 4 would make 9. So what about 2? So 2 plus 3 would make 5. 2 plus 4 would make 6. 6 can't go in the box, so we can't be 2, 4. The 5 could be with the 3 to make 8. And the 5 could be with the 4 to make 9. Or the 6 could be with 3 to make 9. The 6 can't go with 4 because that would make 10. So let's go back over that. So actually 5, 4, 9 isn't possible because of the diagonal constraint. And 2, 3, 5 isn't possible because of the diagonal constraint. So I was kind of ignoring the constraint, maybe on purpose. You'll have to make your own judgment there. But to go back over this again, 2 plus 3, not possible, because 2, 3 next to each other would break the diagonal constraint. So we actually can't add to 5. And so now we can't be 2, 3, can we be 2, 4? Well, that doesn't break the diagonal constraint, but we can't place a 6 here because there's a 6 in the box. So actually this can't be 2. So what about 5, 3, making 8? I believe that is currently possible. And then 6, 5, 4 isn't possible because that would 5, 4 would be consecutive. So even though that is a way to make 9, that's not possible. And then the other possibility is 6, 3 making 8. So actually we're a 5 or a 6 with a 3 because the 5 and 4 would be consecutively diagonal, and the 6 and 4 would add to 10. So we can place a 3 here, and now the 11 forces this to be an 8. And the 8 forces this to be 9, and so 3 plus 6 is 9. So we've actually filled out all these digits. So what seemed like we had a bunch of candidates, actually the diagonal constraint was extremely powerful, and it collapsed our options to just 1. So I'm just going to point this out. It might not immediately be used, but it's nice to mark because this is noticeable early if you're careful about noticing these things. So where can 1, 2, and 3 go in this row? And a nice way to sort of have spotted this is we have a 1, 2, 3 in this box, and this row is, with the 9, 7 here, it's pretty restricted on the low digits already because 4 and 5 are placed. So if we were looking at the low digits, we might see 1, 2, 3 here, that these can't be 1, 2, 3. And then we also have a 1, 2, 3 in this column, meaning this can't be 1, 2, 3. So that leaves this square can be a 1, 2, or 3. And actually it can't be a 1 because of the one in the box. This square and this square can't be 1, 2, or 3. And then that leaves these two squares to be 1, 2, or 3. And this is diagonal with the 3, so it can't be a 2. So additionally, because this can't be a 2, we can point out, and this can't be a 1, one of these two has to be 1. And then additionally, 2 in this column is limited to these two, which I'm just going to highlight green so we can remember, hey, 2 is here or here. So that, I'm not going to fill the candidates yet for the rest of this because it's not too important, but it's good to have noticed this 1, 2, 3 triple, and that 2 is limited to 2 places. All right, so the next thing I'm going to show is that if we look at 3s here, they are actually limited to these 3 cells. So I'm going to corner mark that because these 2 cells, because this 3 sees down here and this 3 sees here. So because 3 is limited here and here, if I were to put a 2 in this box, that eliminates the only other place a 3 can go. So clearly, this can't be a 2. So we're going to fill 3 into that box. And so that will do 2 things. One, actually, it finishes this row, the 1, 2, 3 triple that we just found. So I can remove this highlighting. This 2 sees up here, and it places this 1. And I'm going to just mark a few other things that we can see. So this 1 here sees down into this box, and this 1 here, so we have these 2 ones, and we have this one that sees all this, and there's no way you can put a 1 in a circle. So this has to be the 1. It's the only place in the box that can be a 1. Additionally, we have 1s like this, so 1 is here or here. And just doing more 1s, this can't be 1, and this can't be 1, and this can't be 1, so 1 is limited to here or here. And I'm just going to fill a few candidates in down here. So these are both 5, 7, 9, and this is 6, 7, 8, 9. And if we look at 6s, 6 is limited to these 3. And then for this column, the remaining digits are 2, 5, and 7. But the 2 in this box must be here, because neither of these can be 2 from the 3. So 3 removes 2 from these 4 corners. I was talking about how powerful that is. And then this 2 sees here, so this is the only spot for a 2. So that actually means that these 2 are a 5, 7. And now 5 and 7 straddle a 6. So that's something to look for, even in non-consecutive diagonals. It still can be powerful, because what that means is that none of its corners can be a 6. And just to show that, if this one were a 6, that removes 5 and 7 from this square, which means it can't be anything. So that means this can't be 6. Additionally, 4s see up here. So we got 4s that we can corner mark up here. And additionally, this 5 here prevents 4s from being in this corner, and this 4 sees this row. So 4 can be corner marked here, which means, of course, 4s can't be in this rest of the column. So the next thing we can see is this pattern, also very powerful for non-consecutive diagonals. A 4 must be here or here, and they both see this cell diagonally. So if I were to place a 5 here, then neither of these could be 4, and now there's nowhere for a 4 in this box. So as soon as we corner mark these 4s, we should be looking at, we should be looking at this cell here and removing the 5 candidate, which actually places the 7 and the 5. And now we have this entire column completed. So now that we have finished this column, we are going to finish this box. the candidates left for this box are 3, 7, and 8. And we can see that the 9 removes the 8 from this square and this square, making a 3, 7 pair. So this one has to be 8. And the 3 up here sees the 3, 7, so this is 7 and this is 3. And now that we've replaced the 7 here, this can't be 7, and actually 7 is limited to these two squares. And just like the 4s up here, these 7s do have an effect on this cell, so that means this cell can't be a 6 or an 8. And if we look at this row, the only candidates left in the row are 6, 7, 8, and 9. So if it can't be 6 and 8, it's limited to 7 and 9. That makes a 7, 9 pair, which removes 9 as an option from this cell, and means this cell must be 6 or 8. So now what I'm going to point out is, just with a little coloring, let's call this blue. If this were a 7, then that puts a 9 here. And if this were a 9, that puts a 7 here. That's what that coloring means. So 7 is either here or here. So if 7 were here, that puts a 9 here, which puts a 7 here. And also, this 7 here would see this corner mark 7, putting a 7 here. Alternatively, if the blue were a 7, then that makes this a 9, and the 7, and more importantly, that makes this one a 9. And this 6, 8 actually prevents 7 from being any of these two cells. So just to mark that, 7 is limited to these two cells. So if this 7 sees this one, then this one must be 7. And then if this is 7, that sees here, making this 7. So it doesn't say anything about the 9s as much as the 7s. So we're just going to remember, if we ever place a 7 in the greens or a 7 in the blues, that causes a 7 to be in all the greens or all the blues, no matter how we do it. All right. And I failed to see this earlier, but that can't be a 1 because it's diagonal with the 2. So that the 1 is actually placed there. So the next thing we're going to focus on is this box. And I could have done this much earlier, but there wasn't a reason to show it. We have this 7 sum here, and we filled the 1. So we should have really instantly filled that 6. And that 6 is limiting, along with other place digits, is really limiting this sum here. So if we look at what the actual sum can be, it can't be 1. It technically could be 2, but it really can't be 2 because there's a 1 in the box here. So this can't be 1. So there's no way to make 2. Can't be 3 or 4. Can be 5. It can't be 6 because we just placed that. But it can be 7. And it can be 8 or 9. However, it's pretty easy to see for the same reason that it can't be 7, because on this end, we would have to place a 6. And it's also fairly easy to see that we can't be a 9. Sorry, we can't be an 8. And the reason for that is an 8 would require a 7 here, and 7 would be diagonal with the 6. So this being 5, 9 means this has to be 4, 8, because we're adding 1 to it to make the sum. So the next thing we can see, and we also could have seen this much earlier, but now's the time to tell you, is if we look at this box, where can a 3 go? Well, 3 can't be here because of this 3, and can't be here for several reasons. But that might as well use this 3 as the excuse. And this 2, again, is very powerful in its box. None of these can be 3 because of the 2. So even just from that, we can see that this is the only place for a 3 in the box. All right, the next thing to spot is we have a lot of 1, 2s placed in the grid. And so if we look at row 2, we can ask the question of where can 1, 2 go? So this row has 1, 2 already, so we can't be here. This can't be 1, 2 because the 1 in the box and it's diagonal with a 1. This can be 1, 2. This can't be 1, 2 because of this. This can't be 1, 2 because the 1, 2 in the column. And this can be 1 or 2. So 1, 2 is actually a hidden pair in the row. And now the best way for me to show the next step is to have a bunch of candidates filled. So I'm just going to fill them quickly, and hopefully you'll be able to see why the various constraints, I'm just going off notes here, but you'll be able to see why the various constraints force that to happen. This actually has to be a 2, because 2 can't go anywhere else in the box, as you can see from the candidates I filled. There's probably other ways to see that. Yeah, so just from the rows looking in and the column looking in, this has to be a 2. Sorry, I missed that before. Again, just filling in my candidates. And I'll explain 1 or 2 of them in case there's any confusion. So, for example, you're going to want to look at this 6, 8 here and see that that eliminates a 7 from this cell, which normally could have been a 7. That's my pro tip for you there. So if you don't believe me on any of these, feel free to look at them yourself, but I don't really want to waste your time going through all of these cells and filling them for you. And you may be able to solve the puzzle without filling all those candidates, but I think it's useful for showing the various logic that we're going to have. So there are a few more candidates here that you might be scratching your head at, which I will explain why they're limited before I move on. So especially 8s. So this cell here can't be 8, and that's actually because of the 2 diagonals here that it sees. What would happen if this were 8? Well, these 2 are 3, 7, 8, 9 for their candidates. And obviously they can't be 4 because of this 3 here. And that's the whole row. So if this were an 8, well, they obviously can't be 8 because 8's in the box now, and they're both diagonal to an 8, so they can't be 7 or 9. So that actually places a 3 in both of these cells. So there can't be an 8 here, and we already showed why there can't be an 8 here earlier on this arrow. So feel free to rewind the video if you don't remember that one. But now 8 in this row is limited to these 2. So with an 8 limited to these 2, and we might as well mark 8 is limited to these 3 in this box, that means that 8 can't be anywhere else in the box. So that's, I mean, obviously it couldn't already be here, but that's what eliminates 8s from these 2 squares. So additionally, 8 can only be in these 2. And again, it's because this 7, 9 here, 7, 9 is preventing 8 from being in these 2 corners. Because otherwise what would, if 8 were here or here, this cell could have no values in it. And we just cancel mark these 2 8s, and that sees this 8 pencil mark, which places an 8 here. And that's going to do some good work for us. All right, so next I'm going to place some corner marks. So if we look at this column, 4 can't be here, and 4 can't be here or here from this 3. So 4 is up here. 8s see here, and the 8 here sees this column, and these corner marked 8s see these 2, so 8 is limited to these 2. We have 1, 2, and 1, 2 seeing these 2 columns, so 1, 2 is limited to this column here in this box, and this one sees that there. 3s are limited to these 3 in the box. We can just use our pencil marks to see that. 4 is limited to these 2. We can see that because this 4 pencil mark may not be remembered, but we did that a while ago. So that sees up here, and this 3 sees these 2, so those can't be 4. So that, and the 4 is in the row, so that's why 4s are pencil marked there. So 2s see up into here, so 2 is in here or here. So for the final candidate filling for now, we're going to look at what this cell can be. So it can't be 1 or 2, can be 3, can be 4, can be 5, can't be 6, and it can't be 7, 8, or 9 because of the 8, and the 8 here prevents 7 and 9. This is 3, 4, 5. So now the interesting thing to look at is the behavior of what happens when a 6 is placed here, because the 6 heavily affects both of its diagonals. So the 6 here would remove 5, 6 here, placing a 9, and the 6 here would remove the 5 here. But it would also take this corner mark 3, which means that there's now these 3's point up, and it removes the 3. So 6 places 9 and 4. And you should be able to see it, but I'm just going to fill it in. If 6 places 9 and 4, then this 4 sees this 8, which we can follow and add 1 to it and make a 9 here. But we placed a 9 here as well, so that's no good. That's a contradiction. So that means that this square has to be a 3. This 3 does some work, so it removes these marks. And this 3 here sees the 4, so this can't be 4 anymore. And now we're going to add up the minimum. Since a 3 was removed from here, that really restricts the minimum of this arrow. And the 1 here means we can't exceed 19. So the minimum here is 3 plus 5 is 8, plus 1 is 9, plus 7 is 16. So just bear with me here. Blindly, we could be 6, 7, 8, or 9, because we can be 16 through 19, but there's a 6 in the box, and there's an 8 in the row. So we're actually limited to 17 or 19. And unfortunately, at this moment, there's not a way to limit the combinations here very well, so we'll revisit that later. But having this limited to 7, 9 is quite interesting, especially with the other 7, 9s going on in the grid. So next, because we placed this 3, where can 3 go in box 2? So 3 here limits this 3, 3 here limits these 3's. And the 3 here limits these 2. So 3 can only be in these 2 cells. And so this pattern again, 3's in this pattern, they see these 2 cells and prevent a 2 and a 4. So this one can't be 2, it's a 1-2 pair. So that places a 1 and a 2. That 2 places this one. And we can do some more cleanup. So that can't be 2. And this can't be 1. And we need to clean up this 3 here for this row. Just didn't do that earlier. So now 3 is limited to these 2 squares. So the next thing that you might spot is this 5, 6, 9 triple, where 6's are limited here and here, and they both see diagonals. So what that means is if we were to remove the 6 candidate from both, we'd have 3, just to show, we'd have 3 cells that were each limited to 5 and 9. And we obviously can't spread 5 and 9 across 3 cells, and there'd be nowhere to place a 6 is another way to phrase that. So we can't eliminate this 6, which means neither of these can be any value that's consecutive with 6, namely 5 and 7. So this cell can't be 5 or 7, which places a 4, and this cell can't be 7. So this 4 removes 4 from here and here. And we can now, this 4 sees this 4 corner mark, so we can place this 4. And just going to do some more cleanup. This 4 sees the 5 and this 5. So now we place a 5 here. That gives us our arrow. So we can place a 4 here because 4 plus 1 is 5. Okay, and this 5 here removes 5 and 6 as a candidate from this cell because of the diagonal constraint. That places a 7. That makes this a 5, 6 pair, which places the 9 and the 7. And this 9 sees this 6. So this 5, 6 here means that one of these is a 6. And that's the same pattern that we've seen over and over again, where a 7 here would make both of these 5. So this can't be 7. And with that, let's take a look at our minimum again, because we just removed a minimum. So 3 plus 5 is 8, plus 8 is 16, plus 2 is 18. So 18 is our minimum, which actually means we have to be 19 in our sum. So now if we look down at this box here, box 7, we can do several things. First of all, we placed a 7 in the column. So remove this 7, but more importantly, we can place 9 and 7. And now 7 went on the blues. And if you remember, that means we can immediately put 7s in both of these blues. Additionally, if we ask where can a 5 go in this box, well, this 5 sees these 2, and this 4 sees this 5. So now we can place a 5 here. And this puzzle is basically done. You can finish it however you want. I'm just going to show you one way to finish it. There's so much going on now that there's not a lot of path per se, just however you feel like finishing. All right, next we can look at this box up here, ask where 3 can go. So this 3 sees this cell and this 2 blocks this cell. So actually 3 is limited up here with the 2s, so we have a 2-3 pair. This 9 sees down here, clears this, and the 8s are cleared, as well as the 3. So then we can place this 3 here and place the 9. Up here, this is 7 and 8, so this 7 sees it, so this is 8 and 7. Okay, so continuing on, these 2, we have 1, 2, 3, so we need 4. We have 5, 6, 7, and 8, so that's 4 and 8. And so this should be placeable as 6. This cell, these 2 here are 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, or 8. These 8s here see down, so that lets us place this 8. That places this 6. Remove that pencil mark. Remove these pencil marks. Oh, that 6 sees here, so this is 4, this is 6. That 4 places 8, 4. Here we already have a 7 placed. These 2 can be, looks like 5, 8, or 9. This can't be 9. Oh, this row's done. So this is 8. That leaves 5, 9 pair here, which will get resolved later. Next we have up here, this is 4, 5, or 9. And this can't be 4. This can't be 9. So we have 5, 9 pair. That places this 4. That 4 sees our pencil mark here. That places this 4. This is 5 or 6. This should be placeable, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this is a 7. This is a 3 or a 5. These 2 are 2, 5, or 9. This can't be 9. And now this cell is seen by this 7. So that makes it a 5, 6. 6 is on the arrow, and these had to add to 14. So that makes this an 8, 9. This 6 sees this, so that's a 2, 9. All right, this column needs a 6, so 6. This 4 sees this 5, so that's a 2, 9, 3, 2, 5, 3, and 5. That sees down here to the 9 and the 5. And I'll just delete this coloring. All right, so that is my non-consecutive diagonals puzzle. I hope you had fun solving it if you did try. If not, I hope you had enjoyed watching me go through the solve path. Hopefully we see more puzzles like this in the future. Maybe I'll make another one. I thought it was really fun to combine the concept of non-consecutive diagonals with other constraints that like diagonals, the little killers and the arrows. I really liked how that came together with this 7 and this 22 and this arrow here, that you wouldn't have believed if I told you initially that that was unique just from those to get all of these digits. But yeah, that's my puzzle. And if you want to see more videos from me in the future, it's best to subscribe so that you don't miss a video. And until next time, thanks for watching.